I'd like to wish you all a very good afternoon, good evening, or as the case may be, good morning. This is the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group. My name is Sedley. I'm in London, and today we have a session called 2021 Diversity in Review. It's Tuesday, the 4th of January 2022, and the year has started happily for some and not so happily for others. Today we have a very diverse panel who will be joining us in just a moment. Dr. Nwoye, the founder and president of SDIG. Also, Mr. Yigal Kahana, a highly experienced attorney based in Florida who has spent a lot of time in the diversity and inclusion space. Kelli Bond, remarkable individual. She brings her many, many years of experience to this session. And from ex-military, Mr. Yeathus Johnson, who also brings his many, many years of experience to the session. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Thank you for everything that you've done for SDIG during 2021. And I hope that we will have the opportunity to have as many of you as possible on one of our events and featured on one of our events during the course of 2022. So I would like to drop in now our panelists who will be joining us one by one in just a moment, as you will see. And again, I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us this afternoon, wherever you are across the US or across the rest of the world. So as our panelists start to join us here, we have Ms. Kelli Bond, as you can see, and the others will be joining us in just a few moments' time. Dr. Nwoye will be introducing the session and introducing the panelists, one after the other, giving them an opportunity to tell you a little bit about themselves, a little bit about their work, and a little bit about what they do. That's Ms. Bond, Mr. Johnson with us now, and of course, Mr. Kahana and Dr. Nwoye will be joining us imminently. I'll be handing over to Dr. Nwoye, who will be taking this session forward. As I say, for the audience, please drop any questions or comments into the chat so that we don't interrupt the panelists while they have, hopefully, a very robust and interesting session, of which I've no doubt will be the case.
Sure.
So,
will you turn on the screen sharing for me?
for you, I certainly will in just a moment. Don't worry, it's all taken care of. Absolutely, every single time. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Nwoye will be with us in just a moment, and he is now, which is fabulous. And where are you? There we go, Miss Bond.
Okay. I still have there we go.
I know. We're all taken care of. Never fear, SDIG is here. Dr. Nwoye has now joined us. He's on mute, and as soon as he's available again, then he will be fantastic presenting each one of our panelists. And I think we also have Mr. Kahana just to drop back into the room. He should be any second now. I know he had a few issues with his laptop, something I can't control from London, unfortunately. But yet again, for everybody who is joining us on behalf of Dr. Nwoye and the SDIG team from 2021, a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for the efforts that you make. And may I now hand over, while I go and check if Mr. Kahana's okay, now hand over to Dr. Nwoye to introduce his panelists. Dr. Nwoye.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adam. I want to first of all apologize for the tech glitches that we've encountered this morning. And I want to, having done that, we can do, that's something sometimes beyond some of us. I recognize that number of you have been waiting, number of you have been calling, trying to get in, but I want to apologize to you for that. And having said that, I want to tell you that we have distinguished people here. The depth and breadth of what they're doing to push for equity, or rather peace, equity, and social justice is unimaginable. All I pray is that they could continue to push forward with courage, that they could be allies to one another in support of what they do, because we need them, and we need them so badly. So having said that, SDIG is actually founded on the belief that some of us are not having the space to share their thoughts, to share their views, are not even recognized in some settings. Therefore, we created this SDIG in a sense to provide safe, open, and inclusive engagement platform, to serve as an open and engagement platform where people can generate ideas, individuals and groups learning through our posts, shared member stories. Someone I call our own, Ngozi Adechi, she wrote a book in which, or even her TED Talk, she says, the danger of single story. And then I say, the power of multiple stories. Because what you are doing is that you are bringing to bear the power of multiple stories. When we share multiple stories, we see through the windows we had never seen before. It elevates us to a new and higher contour of understanding, of learning of different people, getting to know one another. So without going too much, I'm gonna just introduce my guest simply by saying that Kelli is somebody I know. I've worked with her for some time now, and she's committed to military services, and she's a DL specialist, and he looked at it from holistic, or what I call holistic standpoint. And yet, Yeathus Johnson, please bear with me if I crucify your name as they usually
you're pretty close. You're pretty close. That's good. That's good.
I briefly looked at your work. I have to apologize this morning. I was really taken aback. You're phenomenal. I saw what you do, and it reminded me of my view of multiple stories. You use this one by Annette Godread, who wrote about the 19th, June 19th. And you see from her personal standpoint, stories many people don't know. But when, in absence of getting such people to share the stories, we can read the book and understand. But the powerful thing you guys do is that you share the stories. Mr. Johnson, you brought someone who is of Chinese origin, who is a finance expert, who discussed her beginning and how she's giving back. I appreciate it and continue to do that. And finally, I have to go to my friend, Yigal, whom I often agree with, but disagree with in some ways. But having gotten to know this man, I have to say what I believe it was George Bush who said that he saw the soul of the man. So I've seen his soul. This is a good man with precision, with looking at things in a way to better the society. He has personally done so much work. You know, some people may do talk, but he's actually implementing things that are changing things, like the work he did in several litigations. I'm not gonna go into that, but the one I want to touch is the English program he prepared, and for the Ethiopian Jewish, Israelis Ethiopian, and the work he has done in civil rights related areas. Now he's delivering lectures on Zoom to the Israeli police to inform them about diversity, equity, and inclusion, as he usually says it. I agree with him there. He doesn't agree with me when I say social justice, and we are still working our cobwebs there. So he has done so much, and now he's coming up with a book which I think would be fascinating. I've read some part of it, not a lot, but what I read was like incredible. And finally, he's doing some work here with me at SDIG, and the work is on teaching racism. Initially, I was like, what do you mean? On teaching racism. Then we began to talk, began to discuss details. It appears to me that he knows the horrible things that is happening to us as we speak right now. If you're a black person, you cannot walk away from it. And he understood it. So I believe that his view on teaching racism resonates with people when they listen and know the really content of what he's trying to say. So without saying further, I'm gonna go to you, and he's gonna begin by asking you individuals to introduce yourself, tell the public what you do, because what you do, I think, is awesome. And I'm going to begin with my friend, Kelli Bond.
Thank you very much here. I am very honored to be here this morning. Let me see what I can do to present my, okay, are you able to see my screen? I guess not. See if I can present right now, PowerPoint. Okay, he's, okay.
I guess we can see your screen now, Ms. Kelly.
You can see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Just go ahead. Thank you so much.
It's having difficulty on my end seeing. Are you seeing this?
We're seeing it. We're seeing it.
Okay. I guess we, okay, so it says DEI highlights over a lifetime in that?
Yes.
Screen? Okay, very good. I can't see it back. It's doing a PowerPoint live for me here, and I will go off screen in the meantime here, so to save bandwidth for you all. Okay, good morning, everybody. You guys wanted me to know what I do. My name's Kelli Bond, and away from SDIG, I am a consultant and have been one for most of the last 40 years here, serving roles in human resources, in the beginning in the learning and development and little bit of training space, and just expanding out to include more of the organizational effectiveness activities, such as organizational development, internal, external communications, and so forth. I also consider myself an educator especially in the written communications and other spaces. You can learn more about that on my LinkedIn, from my LinkedIn profile. I come to the DEI space with quite a bit of intersectionality, if you will. Here, I am fond of saying that my family is a veritable United Nations. And by that, I mean that just from in my own DNA alone, there is 5 distinct heritages represented there. From my mother's side of the family, she is 100% American-born Okinawan, meaning she was not born on one of the bases over there, but she was actually born in Hawaii and she's 3rd generation, in her early 80s right now. And so that's her. And then from my dad's side of the family, and I'll get into a little bit more of that in a moment, Native Hawaiian. He's half Native Hawaiian and half mixture of Irish, Scottish, and English. So if anybody was ever wondering about me, the Bond name being a married name, or as someone used to joke, adopted, no, that is my birth name. And I've been that way for almost 63 years now. And then there, just from marriages, Dad had married 2 times after my own mother. And, from my sisters, we bring in 5 more different ethnic backgrounds. And that's just the immediate family alone. We're not talking about, the expanded both sides there with my aunts, uncles, cousins, and their marriages. So very interesting mix. I also grew up as a Christian ecumenist, meaning that even though I was born a Roman Catholic, my mother ended up leaving the church in 1965 when I was about to turn 6. And one of the issues was over my entrance into the parish school for 1st grade the following fall. And so that freed us all up to attend different denominations. We had also been to the local Reformed Jewish temple when I was a teenager, but probably about 5 or 6 different Christian denominations, ranging from the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons, to some of the Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox faith. And then very quickly, what you can read, there's some neurodiversity in my background. I was one of the very first special education students actually helped through the public school system in the 1960s. You can read more about that on LinkedIn. Part of the LGBTQ plus community insofar is that I actually dated both genders when I was in my 20s, but exclusively men since then. And then in 1999, I added age to the mix there. So, and I'll go to my next slide. Can everybody see the second slide, 1974 to 2019?
Not yet.
I'm just seeing DEI highlights over a lifetime.
I think we have the ability to navigate at the bottom of the screen. There's one of 6 slides. We can navigate ourselves through the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, that's good idea. I appreciate it. If you can navigate to the point, and Kelli, if you could, try to consider time and,
Right, exactly. Yeah, slide number 2, you can look, there's different bullets and, looking at the different diversity activities, diversity, inclusion, and equity activities that I've undertaken both in paid and volunteer capacities over the years, and you can ask me more questions about that. I have a slide here about what I had posted during the right after George Floyd's murder, in fact 5 days afterward, when I was seeing different organizations putting up their statements. I would like to say that the difference between what I did and some of the others is that I actually had activities and years of it to back that up. And then the couple of the on slide number 4, the 2020 to present, the DEI game changer #1. I told you that I would be speaking a little bit about what I'm doing with my dad's side of the family. And game changer #1, the last couple of years has been working with the family foundation, the Kuamo'o Foundation. And you probably noticed that my screen background at the beginning of our session today, that's one of the 2 sacred sites that our family has jurisdiction over. This is a family foundation that focuses on education, genealogy, and stewardship of sacred sites. And so I put up those sacred sites. This one here at the with the large group there involves
Kelli, I think you have awesome presentation, but if you could wrap it up so that we can shift, time is of essence, please. We have to find a way to get you to do this thing and make it in a robust way. I think you have a lot of information that we all need, but if you could wrap up, I would really appreciate it.
Yes. I think you guys can learn a little bit more. I'll be glad to answer questions as you're going through these. And anyway, let's.
They'll have time to ask you questions.
Yes, please.
So let's shift gear to Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, could you take time and tell us what you've done, reflect on what you did last year and what you continue to do, and how do you intend to push it forward?
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me, Dr. Joseph?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Kelli, for your presentation. I will definitely be in touch with you. You've got a wealth of information there and helpful resources. So I am the founder and president of 3CP, Third Culture People, and I cut my teeth in this DE&I space, working with nonprofits and faith-based organizations in the greater New York City area. So I was working with about 25 different cultures, and so exciting. I've worked with West African, I've worked, and you've got a mixture. Dr. Joseph, I'm not sure where you're originally from, but I did my DNA test and I have Nigerian roots, so I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
And some Cameroon and Congolese as well. So work with Guyanese, African American, Caucasian, Anglo, Spanish, Latin American people, Russian, Arabic, Korean, Chinese, you name it. We have worked with the United Nations when it comes to cultures. And I love this type of work. And so last year, and even going back to 2020, when we had the George Floyd incident, that was an impetus for me to get moving in a deeper way, to really help people come together. I consider myself a bridge builder. And a third culture person, 3CP means third culture people. And a third culture person is someone that embraces a greater variety of cultural identities and skillfully bridges the gap between those differences. And so I help people. I do this with businesses, with public schools, with nonprofits and faith-based organizations, really helping them to bridge that gap and to become a third culture person. So we've developed, we work with the Cultural Intelligence Center. I'm certified as a cultural intelligence specialist, and we provide an assessment. And this assessment, it measures 4 competencies or 4 capabilities. One, CQ drive, which is your motivation, your aspiration, your interest to work cross-culturally. And there are subdimensions under that particular capability. And they are intrinsic, right? What's your intrinsic interest, which is inherent. Then there's the extrinsic, which many people might have a higher score. And by the way, these scores are based on a 0 to 100 scale. And that is malleable. Hopefully there's a pre-test and there's a post-test. And we believe in measurement. In the DE&I field, it's so important to have measurements because we just can't have conversations. conversations are the starting point. And so one of the things that we do is we come in and we create these conversations, but we want to work alongside of organizations over a period of time. And we try to help them understand this is not a one and done. You can't just have 1 year and expect things to change. Changing culture requires time. And so we like to get a commitment of training is the open door. Consulting allows us to come alongside of organizations to help them navigate the challenges and the difficult waters that they're working through regarding DEI and B, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and provide those metrics that are so needed. So those going back to the assessment, you have the CQ drive, which I mentioned, and I mentioned 2 subdimensions. The third subdimension after intrinsic, extrinsic is self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is your level of confidence. And what I've discovered is the more you work with people cross-culturally, the more you interact and learn and have these relationships, it develops your confidence. And so my confidence runs pretty high because I know when I make mistakes, which we're all going to make mistakes, I can recover. And people always ask me, Yeathus, how do you work effectively across cultures? Well, for me, I say I lean in the posture of love, right? I have these 5 L's. First, listen, right? We got to listen. You listen empathetically. And then you're learning about people's cultures. You're learning about their values. And what we've got in the second, I'm going to skip to this, the second piece, I don't keep talking because I can talk. The second capability is CQ knowledge. And within CQ knowledge, there are, again, subdimensions. And one of those subdimensions are values and norms. And we all have different cultural values. And what we do is I take a significant amount of time in my training to help people understand the differences and the similarities in their values and norms. And that's where a lot of unconscious bias occurs, is when our values are different and we can't appreciate the values of others. So helping people understand that is significant in building that gap. The second subdimension is sociolinguistics. And for those of you who speak multiple languages, man, I admire you. I envy you because that is a challenge. So what I did was my score in that area is always low because I feel so bad I don't speak a second language. So what I did was, Dr. Joseph, I started learning Chinese. I took Chinese lessons, Mandarin. It kicked my butt, let me tell you. I put it on hold for now because it's just, it's quite challenging. But that's important because when you understand because a lot of people may speak English, but they think in their original language. And when you study another language, then you begin to learn and empathize with those who are coming from those backgrounds. So that's another subdimension. The third subdimension is business and understanding economic systems, business systems, because people come from different countries, especially a multinational company, there are different economic systems working in those various economies and societies. And so understanding how that differs and the similarities with that. And then the fourth subdimension is leadership. And we know that leadership, it varies amongst cultures, right? There's some high power distance cultures. There's some low power distant cultures. And knowing those differences are critical as we learn to work together and bridge those differences. The third capability is CQ strategy. And that's a matter of planning, awareness, being aware, and then checking. And what I would do is I would have a mentor, or what I call a cultural broker, to really help me understand, okay, I'm working with this particular cultural people group. How do you help me understand some of the nuances? And then when I have those meetings, very difficult meetings sometimes, I would come back to my mentor and broker and say, hey, here's what happened. Help me interpret this particular situation. So that's CQ strategy. The fourth is CQ action. And CQ action is being able to bring it all together have those effective interactions with your verbal skills, with your non-verbal skills, as well as your strategy, or just your ability for your speech, what we call speech acts. And so those are all subdimensions. Those three are subdimensions under CQ action. And we have a development plan at the end. So you just don't leave there with knowledge. Now you have a development plan, because we want to measure how you are building that bridge and you're becoming better. And what I recommend is, and so this is what we've been doing in the past. I've started my business. I've been doing this for a number of years, but I started my business 2 years ago. And what we're endeavoring to do differently in 2022 is I want to add life values, because we talk about cultural values, but every one of us have personal, family, life values that we pick up, that we've been socialized to accept. And those values have tremendous meaning. And so that's what we want to bring into. So I've created this new course called Be You, Discovering the Authentic You, so that we can get to that. So
Mr. Johnson, please sum up. Your time is running. Could you sum up? When they ask you questions, I think you may be able to, use that to buttress your answers.
Yeah. So I just want to say we're moving forward with 2022 and really challenging the organizations to create metrics so that we can measure how are they progressing toward these goals of becoming more diverse, equitable, and inclusive in their workspace and creating that culture. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think as we discuss all these things, as I said before, this is written by a Chinese person. This is written by an African-American person. This is written by Riga, who I admire his work so much. And so when we can't get people to do these things, we have those means to learn more, and certainly in line with what you are saying. Now we're gonna shift to my friend Yigal. Yigal Kahana, the floor is yours, please.
Hey everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be here, Joseph. I was very impressed by what I heard from the first two speakers. Mr. Johnson, a lot of what you said makes a lot of sense to me. The specifics of the cultural awareness area, let's say, and how linguistics ties in with our goals here, and or even the tactics and strategies we've got to use to achieve those goals. So I'm glad I can speak 3 languages and know a bunch of words and a few other ones. It's very important to connecting with people, to be able to connect with them. Each language sort of represents its own, each language goes along with its own culture.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that different languages basically represent different mindsets. Each language has a mindset built into it as far as syntax and sentence structure and the way the words fit together and the way ideas are constructed in the words. And each language absolutely has a different mindset built into it. Yeah, that's why I'm very much, Joseph will tell you, I'm a stickler on words and etymologies of words and word roots, and being very particular about what words mean and how we use them, because that is the touchstone. It's the starting point of the communications and the interactions we have with people is in the words that we use, and then of course what we do almost is informed by the words that we use. I started in this space, we could say, back around 2001, before there was such a thing as DEI, working with the Ethiopian Jewish community in Israel. And I noticed that one thing I wanted to say is that most of the people in Israel were very embracing and warm towards the Ethiopian community. And I think the situation is kind of like here, where a small number of people who don't get it can make life miserable for everybody else. It only takes one really dyed-in-the-wool racist type of person to ruin a whole lot of people's day. And it's not like the whole population was against bringing them, otherwise they wouldn't have helped to bring them. But still, there's that segment of the population, however small it is, or however medium-sized it is, that needs to be educated and brought up to the standard that we'd like them to be at. And at the same time, the fact is that we're talking about people who had just come from Ethiopia with different pools of experience, but different, reservoirs of resources. To the parents, for example, were not able to teach their kids English because they didn't speak English. They emphasized education tremendously, but the parents, by and large, were not educated and not able to help their children as much as, let's say, the rest of the Israeli population on average was able to help their children with homework and such. So I started a program for teaching English, which I figured was actually, ironically, the key to integrating in Israel, because if they speak not only Amharic but also and Hebrew, but also English, that commands respect over there. English, a good command of English attracts respect everywhere in the world nowadays, pretty much. So I started with a high school program teaching English and civil society and human rights to Ethiopian students, and expanded it to Arab Israeli students as well, and worked that program for about 10 years until logistical issues made it difficult to continue. And also I had some young children of my own I needed to spend a lot more time with raising them, and I had to make a choice. So I chose to take care of my children and my wife and focus more on that for the time being, because it's not easy running a program internationally, from the States, through teachers, through principals, through counselors. But it was a very successful program in terms of the metrics, the percentage of students that graduated from high school, the percentage of students that went into college, and even now I can see the percentage of students who went on to have good jobs that they're working at nowadays. Since then, I wrote a book, which hopefully will be published in a month or two, and I started doing at least Zoom presentations because of the COVID restrictions. I couldn't go to Israel as often as I used to, through the Israeli police, to Israeli policemen on teaching racism, and that's been eye-opening and led to some great conversations. And every time I do one of these presentations, I learn a lot, and also connect with great people. And next year, I hope this year now, to continue with that, hopefully be able to be there in person a little more often, because maybe this COVID business will wind down some. One of the things I mentioned in the panel discussion suggestions was, what do you have to say about COVID and structural racism? Which I thought was a funny juxtaposition. But if I had to overview it, I'd say these are both things right now. I'm not a doctor, so I can't, or an epidemiologist. I don't think structural racism is really an epidemic, because it's been around for too long, and it's not created by bacteria or germs. It's created by a mental virus that people have been teaching for the last few hundred years. But I think a healthy way to look at it is that these are both potential social dividers, tremendous social dividers. You see now in our society, divisions between people who get vaccinated and don't get vaccinated, division of people who wear a mask and don't wear a mask, and progress.
Mr. Angel, you gotta round up, please. Time is going. Just if you can sum it up, that would be great, so that you can get questions from audience.
Progress is what unites people. Regress is what divides people. That's my sum up.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, I think I'm not gonna monopolize this. I'm gonna shift it to the audience to get questions, from them. So the audience, thank you so much for coming. I would like you to pose your questions to either any of these, gracious people who are here with us. If you want to pose a question that you want three of them to answer, then you let them know. If you want a specific question for a specific person, you also do so. Okay, on that note, well, it's your floor, our guests.
Well, I'd like to make a comment on your significance in language and how it's built into the way we think and therefore the way we feel and act. And, there's not a necessarily a easy solution to that, but do you have any tools or skills you suggest to help people be more aware of how language builds in, the kind of exclusion that is the opposite of diversity?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of my pet peeves that Joseph and I have been working on for the last few months. It's something that you're not going to notice unless you speak different languages, and then you'll understand right away how one language kind of pushes you to think in one way and another language pushes you to think another way. But in terms of just the English language, I can just give you one really clear example, is that the prevalence nowadays, which didn't exist in ancient times, of referring to people as black and white, automatically, and also using the word race, those three words automatically push you to think in a way that divides, because the other meaning of the word race is a contest, which is a zero-sum game with a winner and a loser, whereas life ought to be a win-win proposition where there doesn't have to be a winner and a loser. We can all win if we do it properly. And the ideas of the word black and white are polar opposites that never meet anywhere in the middle, whereas the actual human family is a spectrum of skin colors and heights and weights, that there is no one place you can put a line between them as you can and say that black and white never meet. Yeah, but people always meet. If you put them up in a line from the darkest to the lightest, you'll never be able to say where the lines between the races, supposed races, are, who exactly counts as white, who exactly counts as black, where the line between them is, how many different races there are. So this is an example of the way in which the terminology that we use automatically leads to thinking in a divisive way, in terms of division. And so I've been advocating for people to call each other what they really are, let's say brown or light or dark, but not black and white, because those are false characterizations compared to the reality.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Kahana. Yeah, I totally agree. Language is so important. One of the things that we use in cultural intelligence is we use ethnicity, or culture. So opposed to, someone being black or white, they're Anglo, they're, in Anglo, many Western Europeans would fall under Anglo, Canadians would fall under Anglo. Then you have Nordic Europe, right? You have Nordic Europe. You have, you have Sub-Saharan Africa. You have, people from the Arab community. You have Southeast Asians. You have Confucian Asians and so forth. You have Latin American. So, I think using ethnicity or culture as labels are more appropriate opposed to trying to use color because it doesn't quite white. I mean, the last time I looked at white, people of fair skin doesn't match white. But we have made it a social construct. We've developed this social construct, this binary construct to divide, which is very unhealthy and divisive. So I would do away with the color. The other thing about language that I've been learning is language, as Mr. Kahana said, it explains culture a lot. So I would, I can't learn all the languages, but I can learn some finer points of languages. So I would just Google stuff or pick up some audio books about a language and the finer points of language. Because here's what I learned about Mandarin. Chinese are collectivistic as a culture. Americans are very individualistic as a culture. And when you look at the construct of how a sentence is developed in Mandarin or Chinese, it begins with the bigger picture, the more collectivistic object or thing or person or persons. And then it continues to the smaller, because the emphasis is on the bigger, the collectivism. Whereas in American, we're individualistic, so the emphasis is on the individual and the singleness opposed to the plural. So language even helps you to understand how that mindset, the mindset of the culture exists. So Mr. Kahana, thank you for mentioning that, and thank you, whoever in the audience that asked that question.
That was Dr. Flynn.
Yes.
And for next people who will be asking questions, please identify yourself, possibly tell us where you are coming from. I know that people are coming from various parts of the world, even though some people called and said they couldn't get in. So if you could have some questions, go ahead, the audience.
How you doing? This is Tori Davis. I'm new to SDIG, and just piggybacking more on the white-black conversation. A lot of, well, at least from my experience and doing some research on it, white in theory can mean pure, black can mean not pure or evil. So people use it in the context to justify through social constructs, through whatever location they're in, but primarily religious context sometimes, and in a lot of cases, justifies the contextual way language is utilized. So in working with those to help them, I guess, utilize vocabulary in a different manner and understand how also how non-explicit communication also leads to a lot of assumptions and confusions. Being that religion sometimes grounds language, or spirituality sometimes grounds language, how do you propose helping people change the way they speak and think and use words when it's rooted a lot deeper than just how I use words? That it comes up from a child. It's a social belief system where you're indoctrinated in, essentially. And yes, for some people it is easy to change. Yes, some people gravitate to language. Yes, some people want to change, but there are many people who don't want to hear what you have to say. And that's just, again, that's an indoctrinated mindset, belief, thought process. So how do you work around that from not a work standpoint. Yes, that exists in work, but it starts outside of work and infiltrates into the work system.
You asking me?
Whomever wants to take it.
Yeah, and let me say, we missed Kelli on the first question, and I didn't. I kind of apologize for that. So, Kelli, if you want to take this,
Actually,
you can.
I'm going to defer to him for a moment, but I do want to answer some of the language-related questions in a moment here from slightly different perspective, and that is, you know, with these periodic croppings or emergence of these English-only initiatives, which I think is very closely related, and how do we educate in a broader manner? So, but I will defer the earlier part of your question, Tori, to Yigal and Yeathus.
Tori, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that if it weren't so difficult, it wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't have started this Unteaching Racism program that Joseph and I have embarked on. There's, you know, it's a complex thing because the people are on different levels. You have your kindergartners, you have your high school kids, you have your adults, you have your very old people, and I'm not sure that really old people who've been indoctrinated, brainwashed that way of thinking for many decades are going to be as reachable. I mean, of course, listen, the first step is just to get out there and shout off the mountaintops as many times stop with this nonsense and just say it over and over and over again. So at least we're getting the message out there, and whoever's willing, you know, whoever will understand will understand. Systematically, it's very important that there be curriculum reform, so that we don't indoctrinate the next generation of kindergartners and nursery school kids, and then elementary school kids, and then on into their later academic lives that way, and create curricula that do not use the terms black and white to refer to people, do not use the word race to refer to groups of people, and start a revolution against that kind of poisonous teaching that's been going on for so long. I mean, we have to just keep insisting that. And Joseph brought up a good point to me before, which is the idea of cognitive dissonance. That however much people may have these constructs in their heads, we can keep showing them over and over again that actually nobody's really black, like outside of my computer, and nobody's really white, like my piece of paper, or like your jacket, because people have blood and they have, you know, colors, and those are simply not applicable. And if you want to love the lie more than the truth, I might not be able to stop you, but at least I can keep putting it out there. And as Joseph is fond of saying, there's 10% on this side that you might not reach, and 10% of that side that you might not reach, but there's 80% in the middle that you have a good chance with. I think
we lost them.
Yeah, sun
frozen
for the moment.
Well, if he's frozen, maybe we should get more questions from those who are unfrozen.
Yeah, I think he's trying to dial back in. Okay, there
he is.
All right.
Sorry, I just had sort of network glitch, but that's how I would answer the question.
Okay.
Thank
well, you. More questions from the audience or comments from anyone on that?
Yeathus and Kelli, did you have any answer or comment to my question?
Well, I'm going to come back to the mentality that has given rise to the various English-only initiatives that somehow wind up on the ballot every few years. Those, of course, are rooted in extreme racism. And, you know, what I hear a lot is, oh, you know, my ancestors came to the United States and they learned English really easily. So, you know, everybody else should. Well, I have news for those folks there. No, not everybody learns it the same way. If you are strong in your primary language from where, you know, whichever part of the earth that you've come from, then you are going to pick up English very easily. This comes straight out of language acquisition theory that people in linguistics and who are also studying communication disorders to become speech language pathologists, etc. And people who teach English as a second language also learn too. The other thing, you know, if they were struggling in some aspect of the native language, then, you know, there's going to be similar difficulties with acquiring English here. So what I think, you know, this all just kind of boils down to, I think folks needing to unlearn that part, you know, through different cultural studies as they are coming up through the grades. And then I will leave it at that for right now. This could be easily an entire, you know, 2-3 part series. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
More questions? Otherwise, I have some for them before they could ask one another questions, should they choose to do that.
Yes.
Audience questions? One more call.
With
Audience
police,
question? Okay,
with
go ahead.
police reform and the racial issues that are very prevalent. Me being a Black man, I see systemic, well, to use the word racism, that we face on a daily basis, such as even in neighborhoods where you have during the COVID time. So here's how COVID and race can relate, which was kind of brought up. During the COVID time, we had soccer, baseball, primarily sports of those of white culture. Okay. And then we had basketball courts, primarily a Black culture. I know you don't want me to use those words, but you know, just to keep it relevant to what we still use today. The goals were taken down and they weren't put back up for a long time, while others were allowed to gather, play baseball, play soccer, go to games. Their season started, while other areas were not allowed to thrive in that same manner. So you have, and I'm also, I have friends of various backgrounds, and I actually introduced them to, okay, well, look, see, they're saying, oh, social distance, no gathering, no this, no that. But yet we have the intramural leagues and youth leagues going on for soccer, baseball, or a football type thing. But then the actual basketball courts in the neighborhoods of color, their goals were still down. They weren't put back up, but everything's up and running in the neighborhoods that are not of color. So that's where I saw the meeting of COVID and a lack of diversity and inclusion meet head on right there from a community standpoint. And that was all around. So, you know, then you're looking at policing in the neighborhood, which can be from the actual police itself or just the governance that are put down from a county or a city. How do you all try to work with those type of dynamics, because that's what really hurts communities and cities and cultures, is that, I wanted to go shoot at the basketball court alone by myself. Couldn't do that. But if I wanted to go play baseball with a group of people, I could. If I wanted to go play soccer with a group of people, I could. But why couldn't I go to the basketball court? Well,
so
predominantly is playing basketball.
Tori, if I could jump in on that, I think one of the key things in African American communities, there are community conveners. And when you have a community convener, such as a church or a nonprofit or some other community organization, it's incumbent upon those organizations to step up and be that voice that represents the collective. And it's important that they build relationships with politicians, with the powers that be, the police force, and so forth, because they represent a group of people. And I've worked with organizations, I've worked with churches, I've worked with nonprofits who assume that role and have built bridges and relationships with the police force and with the political parties to make sure that the resources and the services are available for the citizens of that particular community. So as an individual, something you could do is perhaps, reach out to those types of community conveners to say, hey, what are you all doing? Here's what I see. What are you all doing? There are some who take initiative and they'll survey the community to determine what are the top needs. What are the top needs in this community, and how do we go about addressing them? Because they exist for a purpose. So that would be my take on it.
Thank you.
I'll kind of jump in on this one here, just from the, having worked with my own city years ago on its Americans with Disabilities Act initial technical advisory committee. In addition to working with the community conveners, if you can't find one immediately, the cities or the counties Recreation and Parks District would be an excellent resource to come in contact with, because they run those community sports activities for youth, 99.9% of the time here. And now shifting over to the policing aspect of it and better police and community relations, some welcome bit of news that I heard from one of our SDIG on LinkedIn members, AJ Ali. You might have heard of him. He is the head of Love is the Answer, based on his own experiences in the military and with the police. He and his group and the National Association of African Americans in HR are going to be teaming up this coming year and moving forward with, the recruitment and selection and retention of quality police officers who, they have determined, can be taught to be more anti-racist, or, already have those qualities within them. The one thing that I would like them to see them doing, because, as you know, from the IO space there, they use IO or police forensic psychologists to do the heavy duty screening for, the moral and cultural values, more of that. They need to hook up with divisions 14 and 41 of the APA,
okay,
their local chapter, to really make that totally robust. So.
Well, if I may add to this, because I think this is an important question. I did some work in the area of how we socioculture ourselves, and Johnson and Yigal had alluded to that. So was Kelli. I try to look at it from what I consider as holistic standpoint. We're talking about police, we're talking about church being helpful, and so on and so forth. But you know, there's nothing dramatic as what someone sees with his or her naked eyes. If you go, if you're familiar with the work of Jonathan Kuzo, who chronicled schools, where you have two schools in one community, the only difference is the line or maybe a bridge. Somehow they have leaders who lead in these communities. When you look at those things as a child, it's sort of really ingrained in you. Kids are not blank slates. They came there with the experiences that they have acquired based on what you see. Kahana usually talks about objective truth. Well, that's objective truth for those folks. So when they are coming across or saying something about anything, that's their truth. And that's why we believe very strongly that we have to have an open environment where people tell their truth. So as Tori was saying, it's hard to look at other sports being allowed to keep going, and then the one you feel like, well, you are in there is closed. And the little kids within that community are not blinded. They will see that. And their parents will be good at telling them, I told you, don't do this, don't do this. And sometimes the people or police organizations, if they are not incorporating diverse community, they wouldn't even understand what is going on. So that's where I really advocate that people should be very inclusive so that they can hear all voices. And having said that, I have a question for this gentleman and lady. And my question is this. Assuming that a politician, because that's how we go in this society, the winner takes all. And when you're a winner, a politician, except very few, really, they just take care of their group, which is a recipe for failure. Bear with me for digressing. I read this morning that General Motors, within 90 years, had always outsold every other vehicle producing organization. But this year, Japanese Toyota has passed them with significant number, if I may say. And this should go to General Motors as well as every organization. America is more diverse now than ever, more diverse than any other nation. America has opportunity, but they cannot reap into that opportunity if this racism or discrimination or all kinds of forms, because you're not gonna get the knowledge or the experience of people who could penetrate all parts and be able to push your company. If you're, depending on what you're looking for, if you are pushing on profit or pushing on productivity or so on, you have better ability to engage and get more than those who don't. As simple as that. So, having said that, if you are called to advise president, governor, senators, representative, or county executives or people within your community, having been aware of different mindsets, different whatever, all these things we discuss, language or perception or experience of people, and above all, objective truth, what people see every day. it's hard to divorce that from discussion. If you do that, you're really negating the essence of what you are trying to do. So what would you do? What would you suggest to a president or any of those categories, or maybe even a local person that you know, as to how to overcome this problem? Anyone can take it. All of you can take it. Unless you think it's a bad question, then
That's
we
a great
defeat it.
question. As I've told you before, you can look at this at a micro level and a macro level. And at the micro level, I don't know if the president can deal with it, because it would take too many little tiny pieces of legislation, too many phone calls to follow up and make sure that this basketball court has its hoops back. From the satellite view level, I can't think of anything more important than having a president declare actually a struggle to eliminate racism as a formal national initiative. We could have a Manhattan Project to create a bomb. We can have a project to eliminate racism. And that would send a signal that we're actually serious. And then going along with that, we would eliminate the word race from the law, so that discrimination based on skin color, based on ethnicity, based on national origin is prohibited. And we don't need this redundant and meaningless word race to be in there, perpetuating the idea that there are different races when there's really just one human race. And that, and even like my children are not going to have to choose whether they're black or white, when actually they're neither. And they're not biracial, they're human beings. They're not biracial, they're not triracial, they're not quadracial. You know, the whole racism thing is so illogical. And then again, to try to, as part of the struggle to eliminate racism, have it as a using the pulpit of the White House, of the presidency, and of the party that he's the leader of, whichever one it was, to have them lead the charge against using the terms of white and black to refer to people, and as Yeathus said, to refer to people based on objective terms such as their ethnicity or their culture or their national origin or their height or something that's objective, for goodness sake, but not something meaningless like the term Caucasian that was invented 200 years ago. And someone was going to call me a Caucasian. Wait, I don't have a single ancestor who lived anywhere near the Caucasus Mountains. That doesn't make any sense. Okay? When my grandfather's passport from the British called him an Ottoman citizen. The Ottomans would have never considered him an Ottoman. They would have considered him a Jew from Syria, but certainly not a Turk. And then when he gets to America, all of a sudden he's an Anglo. He's got nothing to do with England either. None of this makes any sense. Returning to objectivity, which is, I'm saying, objective truth. And I have to say that, again, my conception, I said I was a word stickler. My conception of objective truth means that which is true whether you like it or not. And people are not entitled to their own objective truths. People are entitled to their own understanding of what the truth is, to their own perceptions, to their own experiences. Their own experiences are objective truths in their own, on their own. But just because someone doesn't think the sun comes up in the morning, it still comes up in the morning. And just because someone doesn't realize that there's one human race, there's still one human race. The genes that we have in common are 99.8%, no matter who you are, the same. And there's an objective reality that needs to be respected here. And the way people have been teaching for the last couple hundred years flies in the face of that objective reality and has been horribly divisive. So if I was the president, I'd be emphasizing unity by eliminating as many false dividers as possible between people, so people can be more united, can love each other more, can support each other more, can work together for a common cause more, without letting irrelevant, nonsensical things divide us.
I would, Dr. Joseph, I would just add briefly that, you know, with the White House, I think this president tries to diversify his cabinet. I think that's important, is having representation at the table, and not just representation as tokenism, but true representation with empowered voices. So individuals need to be empowered to represent and to speak truth, and, you know, borrow from our German brothers and sisters, where when they have their meetings, they challenge each other. They're about precision, and so they want the best ideas to emerge, and not to take things personally, but realize that we're coming together to challenge our ideas so that the best that we put forward is the best. So your question is an elephant-sized question, and they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So you know, it's very complex, but I think you begin with diversity, inclusion at the table, you know, with leadership, and allowing that leadership to have a voice into the multiplicity of challenges that we have as a country. And oftentimes people, we vilify leadership, and we need to honor leadership more, because it's a tough position all over the world, right? Their leadership challenges. And so the more we could diversify that in every aspect of our country. And the last thing I'll say is that everyone should be hyphenated, because unless you're a Native American, you're from somewhere. And if you don't know where you're from, to me, that's a problem, because your people came from somewhere. They came from somewhere in Africa, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Asia, somewhere in the world. And they came to America, somewhere in Latin America. So we all should be hyphenated if we want to label things, because the census is outdated. The census is so simplified and racist that needs to change, so that people are honored for their heritage. And I think when we do that, we can level the playing field to help us all realize that we all are here from somewhere else, you know, and we've made this land our own, but we have a lot of respect and dignity and honor to give to those who were here before us, because we weren't here. So that's my take.
Thank you very much. Kelli, do you have, Kelli, I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Okay, now I think you all can hear me properly. I'm going to take off on the points about the US Census. I absolutely agree that it needs to be redone here. And a case in point, I am invalidated as an individual, quite honestly. You know, they've come up with all of these different categories that you can check off, but they don't have the mixtures that the Hawaii version of the US Census has, you know, where I would be represented in one of those additional answers. So they really do need to update themselves. The same goes for the EEO-1 forms that employers with 100 or more employees must fill out, and and all that who are receiving any kind of federal grants or funding or have federal customers in any shape or form. Same thing is going on. I'll leave the point at that for right now. In terms of what I would convey about to the leadership here, I'm going to kind of taking my tinier elephant bite here, and this would be to the secretaries and the heads of different agencies that oversee how our businesses do business in this country. Quite honest, when I hear reports of an African-American man being unable to cash his completely valid first paycheck at a bank because they thought that it was a counterfeit check when that employer happened to be down the street from the bank, or when somebody's credit card is declined, or something similar, and it leads to something that stops short of what happened to George Floyd. We need to fix those. Different policies and procedures, and for the case in point, banks here should be, if they're FDIC insured, then the FDIC needs to have some kind of auditing mechanism to allow that bank to stay open, to make sure that their policies and procedures are equitable and fair to all their customers, not just those who have the biggest deposits or, present in a certain way or what have you. So.
Thank you so much. Well, as you can see, time is actually running against us, but these are the type of people that make me to push time. Sometimes I keep it open because the more you hear them, the more you wanna hear. So I really appreciate it. At this time, we're gonna go to each and every one of you to give us information about you and how people could reach you. But before I say that, I want you to be tuned with the work I'm doing with Yigal, which is essentially looking at some of these issues we've discussed. And I will leave you with this. You've talked about the issues that are confronting us, and you underscored in many ways the importance of objective truth. And objective truths, again, can be seen from the perspective of the teller. But when you engage in situations such as this, you'll be able to hear varieties of truth. There's a book titled Broken Truth. It's kind of like puzzle. You have to get this puzzle right. And when you do that, you see all kinds of truth. And when you see all these truths, you also know that there are some of them that are false. But by engaging with one another, you come with something that everyone could, could see. Okay. So with that, I'm gonna say, Yigal, could you, or rather, I'm gonna move to closing statement, and each person could close, also give information about how people could reach the person and how we can do this, and we're gonna continue the process because we have a lot of work to do.
Hey, okay. Hey, can I jump in here? I need to get going to the meeting, and I'll be very brief. Okay. You could reach me. I'm going to reach out to you on LinkedIn. I'll connect with you all. I'm also on the other social media platforms at YEA Johnson. And just a closing statement. I'm impressed with the work and the commitment and the years of service that each of you panelists have presented, as well as you, Dr. Joseph, and your organization, SDIG. Look forward to connecting with you all more. Again, I come at this from the angle of cultural intelligence with well-researched tool and resource to help people begin to have these conversations, to have some measurements, whether that's a 360 measurement, whether that is the 360 being others measuring them, whether it's a pre and post measurement. And then I also do work with emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, and inclusive intelligence. And there's another set of assessments that I use for that. And just thank you for having me today. Look forward to more conversations and working together. Thank you.
Thank you for having you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's go to the lady, Kelli. Could you give us a summation and then give information as to how people could reach you before we go to my friend, Yigal?
Okay, I've dropped my information into the chat there. I can be reached on LinkedIn. You can see the address there. I've also took a screen capture of all our guests here today, so I will also be reaching out as well. Kelli.bond@gmail.com, LinkedIn, and I also am at Go to Bat for DEI on Twitter.
Well, Kelli, whether you know it or not, one of our own, Samia, who is excellent, whenever Adam is doing great job, but Samia is always on the background doing some work. She had already flashed your email and your information before, so that people will see it. So thank you so much for your contribution and your work.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Yigal.
Yes, sir.
We want to hear from you. What closing statement as a lawyer would you give us that gotta help us to think and be able to do better?
My closing statement is not as a lawyer. My closing statement is as a political philosopher. And as a political philosopher, the way Mr. Johnson's coming at it from the point of view of cultural awareness and cultural intelligence, I'm coming at this from the standpoint of social dynamics and social progress. This is all about making social progress. I define social progress as that which unites people in a society and makes them love each other and support each other and work together for a common purpose more than they had before. And social regress, the opposite of progress, is whatever divides people and makes them hate each other and fight with each other and less able to work together for a common purpose. So in that context, it's clear why the ideas of eliminating racism and building up mutual acceptance, mutual respect, mutual honesty is so important, because that's really the glue that holds the society together. And since we are all in the same society, it's incumbent on us, it behooves us, it's necessary for us to work towards a more just, a more fair, and a more efficient, which is ultimately a more moral society. It doesn't just benefit one individual, it benefits all of us in the long run. So I'm looking at it from, again, like from the satellite view. That's why I think this is so important. That's why we can never give up this effort and never quit, and not give up the ideological high ground that we occupy.
Thank you so much. And I have to say to all the audience that I really appreciate each and every one of you. I see a number of you. I see Dr. Joanne Roll. I see Robert Robinson. I see I see Dr. Godson Chukuma, and the rest of those whom I already know and have spoken with. I want to tell you that I appreciate you coming to this particular section. And the other work we're going to be doing, I guess that you should stay tuned, look at the SDIG site, whether you are looking at it from standpoint of our web page, or looking at our web page will be much more prominent because of the work, excellent work our team are doing right now. We're gonna be unveiling it very soon. So I really thank all of you for coming. And that will come to the official end of this show. And of course, I'm available to talk with anyone who is still staying.
Yeah, I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Nwoye. Thank you very much to our guest, Mr. Yigal Kahana, Ms. Kelli Bond, Mr. Yeathus Johnson. And to be honest, all of you have done a fantastic job. Thank you very much for being part of this process. Thank you very much for taking the time. This is the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group, broadcasting from London, from our headquarters in Maryland, with our guests around the USA and our audience coming from across the USA and across the world. From the media team here at the SDIG Media Team Group, myself and Sumaya Khatun would like to thank you very much for taking the time and the trouble to join us. Hopefully you have had a fulfilling period and a very good start to your new year. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. We'll close with just a few slides that will allow people who are viewing this on YouTube to find out a little bit more about SDIG, Dr. Joseph Nwoye, and the Systemic Diversity and Inclusion Group. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. Oh, sorry.
And Happy New Year.
Yep.
And of course, you can now find SDIG on YouTube with our own channel. So drop in there, take a look. This will be broadcast on YouTube in the next week or so you can pick up on this event and several others. If you want to support us, then by all means do feel free. Come to our website at systemicdiversity.org or to any of the links that are on the slide in front of you at the moment. It's been a pleasure being with all of you. So on behalf of our guests, Ms. Kelli Bond, Mr. Yigal Kahana, and Mr. Yeathus Johnson, and on behalf of Dr. Joseph Nwoye and the SDIG team, thank you very much indeed. It's been such a pleasure.